One of the things that I pride myself on is defending the Second Amendment. I've done it for a long time, going all the way back to work at NRA TV. And every time there is a mass shooting, what do? We get more calls for gun control. They want to do away with the Second Amendment altogether, or at least legislate it out of existence if they can. They fail to see the benefits of firearms in the hands of good people. This is Karine Jean-Pierre just yesterday doing that, cut 8.
And so, look, the president has done the work. He's asking Congress to do their job. Let's do some legislation, more legislation, on top of the bipartisan legislation that he was able to sign this summer.
They want more gun control. So I took flack from those on the left for saying that what I think we need are more good guys with guns out in public. That could be more police officers. There are certainly good guys with guns. That hero cop stopped the shooter at the Allen Premium Outlets just up the street from where we broadcast here in Dallas. But it could also be you. It could be a good guy with a gun who trains to use a firearm, knows how to use it in a time of need, and keeps everyone around him or her just a little bit safer. How do I know this works? Because there's research on it that the media refuses to do. Joining me now is the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center and former senior advisor for research and statistics at the Justice Department Office of Justice Programs. Dr. John Lott is with us. John, great to have you back on.
Great to talk to you again, Grant. Thanks for having me on.
So I saw a piece you wrote, I guess it was in February, about good guys with guns and how often they stop bad guys and how underreported it is. Why don't you just tell me about what you found in your research?
Right. Well, if you look at so-called active shooting cases, these are cases where guns fired in public, not involving some other type of crime like a robbery or a gang fight, anything from one person being targeted and missed all the way up to a mass public shooting. Over the 9 years from 2014 through 2022, you find that if you're looking at places where people are legally allowed to carry, over 60% of those active shooting attacks were stopped by legally armed citizens. On our website at crimeresearch.org, we have 37 cases of where police say there would have been mass public shootings if it hadn't been for a law-abiding citizen legally carrying since 2020. These are dramatic cases, but they often rarely get anything other than a couple local news stories there. They don't get national news coverage. And in the couple times that it does get national news coverage, the national news coverage gets it wrong. But the bottom line is, I think the entire gun control debate would be dramatically different if just the media did a couple things, would mention once in a while when we keep on having these mass public shootings in places where guns are banned. And also mention all the attacks that are stopped that never become mass public shootings because law-abiding citizens are able to stop them. They refuse to do either of those things.
Well, I believe the statistic is 98% of all mass public shootings, and that's an important definition. Mass public shootings are those where the victims had no involvement in the crime. It was a random attack at a grocery store, a church, or something like that. Happen in gun-free zones. The Allen Premium Outlet happened to be a gun-free zone. If this was just a coincidence, or if math held true, what would be the percentage? Because I don't think that's a coincidence, John.
Look, I agree with you. You look at most states, people are allowed to carry in the vast majority of the state. 97, 98% of the state, people are allowed to carry. And yet these mass murders keep on occurring in those tiny areas within the states where people aren't allowed to carry. But look, it's just not the statistics there. One just needs to go and read the diaries and manifestos for these mass murders. We just had the Nashville Coventry School attack there. The Biden administration has been holding on to the manifesto, but the Nashville police noted there had been another target that the murderer had aimed at, but had decided not to go after because of armed security there. You look at the Buffalo mass murder from last year. In his manifesto, he explicitly talks about why he picked the target that he did. And his reason right up at the top was he wanted to go to a place where he knew his victims were defenseless, that they didn't have concealed handguns because he worried that would make it much more difficult for him to go and stop. Look, you know, one of the debates that we have, you know, in Uvalde, all these other places are gun-free zones that have occurred, is whether you want to have one armed officer in a place. The problem is, if you have one person in uniform with a gun, they have a very difficult job. Let me ask you a question. Would you put air marshals on planes in uniforms? Would anybody go and support putting air marshals in uniforms? And I don't know anybody who would do that for a simple reason. If you make that person readily identifiable, you give real tactical advantages if there's a terrorist on the plane. They know who they need to take out first. And so if you have one uniformed officer in a school or someplace else, you know, there was apparently a at the Allen Mall that was there. I believe he was the first person that was attacked by this killer that was there.
And I also believe he was also unarmed, John. That was a security guard who was at there, and God rest his soul, trying to keep people safe. But he was an unarmed mall security. I tell any security guard, if you're going to put yourself in a position where you have to defend people's lives, it's very difficult to do without a firearm. And I agree with you on the police, which is why I think there needs to be more than one uniformed officer. I like the idea of having a uniformed officer as a deterrent. We also know that shooters will say, well, I didn't go there because cops were there. But I also like having ununiformed, maybe teachers, where you don't know who's carrying. And so that also offers up a level of deterrent. But I wanted to ask you one more question, because the left constantly says that if we have more good guys with guns, guys like me and guys like you, Dr. Lott, out there, that, well, we could possibly miss our target and hit an innocent bystander, or the police are going to mistake us for the attacker and they're going to shoot us instead. Has that ever happened?
Look, you look at all these active shooting cases that we're talking about, well, you know, over 60% stopped in places where they were allowed to carry. There's not one case where they accidentally shot a bystander. There's not one case when they got in the way of the police. There's not one of those cases where the police accidentally shot one of the permit holders that were there. Are these things possible? Yeah, they're possible. But at least, you know, you want to be able to go and point to cases where it actually happens if you're going to make it a strong argument that was something that we really need to focus on. The same thing with armed teachers. You go and look at the legislative debates. People go and worry about a gun being able to be accessed by the students, or the teacher losing their temper and shooting a student, or something else bad that's happened. We have 20 states that allow teachers to varying degrees to be able to carry. We have thousands of schools. Many of them have been up to 2 decades that we've had these things, and yet there's not one single example where those types of, you know, concerns have actually occurred.
John, how dare you use statistics and not just go on the emotion of things like the Democrats love to do? This is why they despise the work you do, because you literally back it up with numbers and legitimate research. And you know they despise you for it, but we love you for it, Dr. John Lott, and it's always great having you on the program. Thank you for fighting for the Second Amendment and the truth, by the way.
Thank you for being there, Grant. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, buddy. Always good to see you. All right, folks.